So, every now and then, I come across a story that just kind of sticks with me, one that I really struggle to forget and sometimes just struggle to get out of my mind. And it's not because it's dramatic or gory or like super disturbing or scary. It's kind of more like I can't imagine how I would feel in that situation if I were that person. And it just feels wrong in a way that I kind of can't explain. So, today we're gonna dive into some of these stories. They are pretty much stories that sound like they shouldn't be real or that they're fictional or that they're, I don't know, made up, but they are 100% real. And I do think once you hear these stories, they will probably stick with you for a while too. So, here are three completely real life, true events that happened that feel just way too twisted and way too strange to be true. So, the first story explores a fear that most people would never have to face in their life. Not the fear of being alone or of getting hurt or injured or dying, but actually the fear of being completely alive, completely aware, while the rest of the world believes that you are just not. Basically, you're being treated like furniture, pretty much ignored, dismissed, spoken over, and the worst part is that you hear every single word that is happening around you, yet you cannot acknowledge anything that is happening around you. You can't move, you can't speak, you can't blink your eyes. You basically cannot communicate in any kind of way to anything or react to anything that is happening around you. And sadly, this is the reality that one boy lived through. His name was Martin Pistorius, and this story took place in South Africa a few years ago. Okay, well, more than a few years ago. Martin grew up in South Africa in the 1980s. He was a very quiet kid. He had lots of gadgets and electronics. He was very fascinated by technology, and he liked taking things apart, figuring out how they worked. He had an all-round pretty good life. He had a very good relationship with his parents and a very good relationship with his friends at school. There was nothing out of the ordinary in his life at all. Until one day, he was only 12 years old. He came home from school feeling pretty sick. It all started with a sore throat, which is obviously something very small and very normal. Lots of people have sore throats every day, and everyone just suspected it was a cold or the flu. But the sore throat never ended up going away. It got worse as the days went on. He became very weak, and then he became confused. Then he stopped eating entirely, and then without warning, he just started shutting down. His whole body just kind of started giving up on him, physically, mentally, just completely. Within months, Martin was put on a wheelchair where he had lost pretty much all function in his body, in his limbs, everywhere. Then he completely stopped speaking, and finally he completely stopped responding altogether. Doctors were completely baffled. What started with just a sore throat had now just spiraled into him being completely unresponsive and his body not responding to anything. Doctors couldn't pinpoint what was wrong with him at all. Some thought it was maybe a tuberculosis of some sort, maybe one that had ended up in his brain. Others mentioned a degenerative neurological disorder, but no one had any real clear answers. But at the end, doctors did suspect that it was this degenerative neurological disorder in his brain that had caused his body to completely stop responding. What they did say, however, was that there was no chance that Martin was ever going to return back to normal, that he was basically as good as gone. They told his parents that he had the mental capacity of a 3-year-old and that they should just take him home and make him comfortable. So that is exactly what his parents did. They took him home and made him comfortable for over a decade. For over a decade, they kept Martin at home, expecting the worst. Martin's parents bathed him, they dressed him, they fed him through a tube, they looked after him for many, many years. They turned him every few hours so that he wouldn't get any bed sores. But mentally, they believed that Martin was no longer there at all. They talked about him and around him, but not to him, because they thought that he did not know what they were saying. In time, they pretty much stopped talking at all. The house grew very quiet around Martin, and there was just basically a daily routine that they would take him through, and they were just feeling overall hopeless. But the very terrifying aspect of this is that Martin was there. He was completely aware of everything that was happening around him. He wasn't always completely there though. He did say that he came back to consciousness at around 14 years old. So he was very sick for 2 years where he wasn't really aware of things that were going on around him, but he did eventually come back to consciousness. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden shift. It was kind of like slowly waking up from a really deep sleep where first he became aware of sounds and then he could recognize them. Then he became aware of time and his parents around him and talking and what they were doing, and then just everything eventually. But Martin still couldn't speak, he couldn't move, he completely lost all control over his physical body. He was just completely locked in. He was basically a brain in a body that had no functioning. He just knew what was going on, but he couldn't do anything about it. He was just a silent, invisible witness to his own life. And Martin also remembers everything. He remembers the nurses that were very kind to him while he was in hospital. He remembers being bathed by all these strangers and being given all these different medications. And he remembers most painfully the day that his mother actually sat next to him and said that she hopes that he would just die. Not out of cruelty, but she was just breaking. I mean, yeah, I get it. Her poor son was just lying on the bed. She thought that he had no idea what was going on, and obviously he couldn't communicate anything back to her, so she thought that she had completely lost him. She thought that her son was already gone, and that sentence, that whisper, stayed with him for the rest of his life, as it probably would for everyone else as well. Years passed, and Martin said that he actually survived by escaping inward. He kind of trained his mind and forced himself to be present, to just count time, to focus on the tiniest changes around him so that he wouldn't completely go crazy. He listened, he observed, and he waited. And most importantly, he had hope that one day people would realize that he was fully conscious and listening to everyone around him. Then eventually one day, all of this hope paid off. Someone finally saw him. Her name was Verna van der Walt, and she was a relief caregiver who noticed something in Martin's eyes, something very subtle. She noticed that he was kind of responding to her with his eyes. He would kind of track her with his gaze, and she noticed a pattern that was one of a conscious human who was making decisions and fully aware of what he was doing. She didn't ignore it. She pushed for him to be reevaluated, for him to have scans and tests done again, and this time someone actually listened to her. Tests confirmed what Martin had known for years and years. His brain was completely fine. It had completely healed, and it wasn't what they initially said it was. His body had just completely betrayed him, but his mind had been alive the entire time. From there, his recovery was agonizingly slow, but it was movement forward in the right direction. He was fitted with a very special computer that allowed him to communicate with very slight head and eye movements, and he learned to speak again, to form thoughts into words. He started physical therapy, and he actually started writing as well. Eventually, Martin even published his memoir Ghost Boy, where he described his experience in vivid and often very painful detail. The book became a bestseller. He also began giving speeches around the world, and in a twist no one saw coming, he fell in love and even got married. Martin met his wife Joanna while traveling in the UK. They connected first through email and then in real life. In 2009, they got married to one another. Then he moved to England, and today he just lives a quiet, happy life, continuing to advocate for people with disabilities and assistive technology. He can't walk or speak in the traditional sense, but he is far from silent. So he definitely isn't 100% back to who he was all those years ago when he initially got sick, but he is able to communicate, he's able to move, and he is able to function like a human being, which is great. But for 12 years, Martin Pistorius lived a waking nightmare that people literally cannot comprehend. I cannot comprehend it. I just thought that that was absolutely terrifying. Can you imagine even having that for a year, let alone 12 years? And he is so lucky that that caregiver came to help him and give care to him. Because if she hadn't, how much longer would it have been before someone noticed that he was fully conscious? That is the question. The fact that he not only survived, but rebuilt a whole life afterwards is so amazing, and it might be one of the most haunting but also inspiring things I've ever come across. So the second story definitely stuck with me because of how sudden and final the whole situation was. It's completely contradicting the previous story with Martin, where it happened over the span of his entire life and obviously 12 years of terrible, terrible agony. This one was just instant, which is also just as terrifying as all of the years and all of the time spent in the previous story. There's no build-up, there's no slow descent into something dark and disturbing. It's literally 1 second everything is fine, and the next you're just gone, which is crazy. And that is exactly what happened to Jeff Bush. So in 2013, Jeff was living a quiet, very normal life in Sefner, Florida, just outside of Tampa. He shared a very small home with his brother Jeremy and some other family members. It was a normal Thursday night, nothing out of the ordinary. People were winding down, brushing their teeth, getting ready for bed. Nothing out of the ordinary. So after Jeff had finished his whole nighttime routine, he went to his bedroom at around 10:30 p.m. to go to bed. And within minutes, he was just gone. Not walked out, not kidnapped, not murdered, just gone. His brother Jeremy was the first person to hear it. A extremely loud crash, like something enormous had hit the house. Then the sound of splintering wood, and then silence. He obviously ran towards Jeff's bedroom to find out what on earth that huge crash was. Then he opened the door and the entire floor of Jeff's room was missing. Where the bedroom had been, there was now a huge gaping black hole nearly 6 meters wide. Jeff's bed had been completely engulfed by this hole and it had disappeared completely. His dresser was gone, his bed was gone, and obviously so was Jeff. Jeremy screamed his brother's name and jumped into the hole just without thinking. He tried to dig through the rubble, screaming his brother's name, hoping that Jeff was just somehow buried under maybe some dust and dirt, but the ground was very unstable. The walls were collapsing. So first responders had to physically pull him out to keep him safe and to keep him from being swallowed into the hole too. And sadly, Jeff never came back. The hole wasn't just deep, it was pretty much bottomless. It kept growing, it kept eating into the foundation of the house and eventually threatening the surrounding homes around it as well. Geologists later confirmed that it was just a huge sinkhole, something Florida is notorious for due to the very soft limestone beneath the surface. These holes can just open without warning, very suddenly, swallowing cars, homes, and in this case, an entire room and an entire person. Rescue teams worked tirelessly. They tried everything. They sent in specialized equipment, ground penetrating radar, even robotic cameras to try and see if they could recover Jeff. But unfortunately, it all just became way too dangerous. The earth was still shifting, and any attempt to retrieve Jeff's body risked triggering a much larger collapse, and it put the whole neighborhood completely at risk. In the end, they unfortunately couldn't recover anything. No body, no belongings, just a hole in the ground where this person's room used to be. The home was completely demolished, the property was declared unstable, and a metal fence surrounds the home to this day, so no one else can fall into the hole and potentially be injured or hurt. Jeff Bush was just 37 years old, and in less than 10 seconds, his entire life was just gone. He was quite literally just swallowed by the earth on a completely normal night in his bed. What makes the story so disturbing is that it was just so completely random. I mean, there was no warning, there was no explanation, it just happened, and there was nothing that anyone could do about it. It's very tragic, and it's just completely terrifying to me that there's a chance that this can just happen to anyone. And it's also very, very sad for his brother and all of the other family members that were there, because the one moment your family member's there and the next moment they're gone and there's nothing you can do about it. And this next story also sounds just completely insane, like maybe a story you'd read in a book, or I don't know, a story that you'd see on No Sleep on Reddit, but again, completely true and completely terrifying. So this story starts with a woman grieving. Noella Rukundo had just flown from Australia to her home country of Burundi to attend her stepmother's funeral. It was a very difficult trip, it was very exhausting and emotional, but she did make it to Burundi safely. She stayed in a hotel, and that day she just spent with family. That night, after the funeral service, she went back to her hotel room to rest. It had been a very hard day, obviously very emotional, lots of crying around her family. And when she got back to her hotel, she was sitting in bed when the phone rang in the hotel room. It was her husband, and his name was Belenga Kalala, and he was calling from Melbourne. His voice was very calm and gentle over the phone. He told her to simply go outside and get some fresh air after the very emotional day she was having, Maybe that would help her calm down a little bit. And he was very worried because she just seemed very overwhelmed, and he wished that he could be there with her. Noella, of course, trusted him. I mean, it is her husband. They'd been married for over 10 years, and he was the father to her children. So, of course, she listened to him. She went outside and she took a deep breath, trying to calm the very emotional state that she was in. Then immediately, everything changed. A random man came out of nowhere, approached her in the dark, pointed a gun at her head, and forced her into a car. She was blindfolded, taken to a secret location, and tied to a chair. She obviously was very scared, not knowing what on earth is going on, and she thought that she was going to die. She thought that that was the end for her. Then someone spoke, and what they told her is just insane. Just imagine this. You're sitting there in this chair, blindfolded, and not knowing what's going on, and the first words that someone says to you is, "Your husband sent us here to kill you." At first, of course, Noella didn't believe it. She was completely dumbstruck, and she knew that it had to be some sort of mistake. They definitely got the wrong woman, and it was a complete mix-up. But then they played the recordings from her husband. Phone calls, wire transfers, they showed her all of the proof. Voice messages, it was definitely him. She recognized the voice and she recognized the name from the wire transfers. Her husband had quite literally hired a hit squad to have her executed while she was thousands and thousands of miles away from her whole family attending a funeral. But then again, in another twist of events, something unexpected happened. They didn't actually end up killing her after showing her all of this evidence. In their words, they said that they don't kill both women and children. Instead, they told her that they would spare her life and make it look like the job was done to her husband. So they just staged her death. They told her husband that she had been killed and the job had been completed successfully, and they even got him to pay extra for the cleanup that would happen after murdering someone. Meanwhile, they hid Noella in a safe house for a couple days, just under protection from a local pastor that the hitman had trusted. She kept quiet, and while she was in this house, she had just planned a little strategy in her mind, and then she flew back home. She flew back to Australia to her own funeral that her husband was having for her. On the day of the memorial service, her husband was standing outside of their house, surrounded by mourners, pretending like he hadn't just planned her bloody murder. He was putting on a complete performance, shaking hands, wiping away tears, pretending to grieve his wife that had died under suspicious circumstances. And then in the distance, someone stepped out of the car, and it was Noella. And she was, of course, alive. She said that his face went completely white when he saw her. He staggered backwards and muttered, "Is that a ghost?" And then she replied, "Surprise, I'm still alive." She had set up the whole thing. Her husband was, of course, arrested immediately. They had tons of evidence that he had planned the whole thing. Under questioning, he confessed that that is what he wanted. He just said that he had been jealous, he had been paranoid that she was going to leave him. So in his mind, he thought that killing her was the only way to stay in control of the situation and have her not leave him. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison, and as of course for Noella, she luckily survived this whole ordeal, physically and emotionally. She did say that she was devastated, however, of course she was, but she was not broken. She now speaks publicly about domestic abuse, manipulation, and the dark places that jealousy and control can take people. And this wasn't just a near-death experience, this was betrayal on the deepest possible level. Can you imagine going to your stepmother's funeral thousands of kilometers away and your husband planning for you to get killed? That is just insane. The lengths that people will go without fully thinking out a situation just absolutely blows my mind. The fact that he thought that this was the only thing that could solve his paranoia and jealousy problem, that makes no sense to me. She didn't just survive, she literally walked into her own funeral and took her whole life back. And for that, that's an amazing woman right there. And there you have it. Those are 3 stories that sound completely untrue, but they are completely true. And all 3 are equally as terrifying as the other. All 3 completely different situations, completely different time frames. And all 3, I just have no idea what I would do in that situation. It all just sounds insane to me. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit like and hit subscribe, because this is the kind of content I make. Creepy, unsettling, disturbing things that just happen in real life that I want to share with you that has had an impact on me. And I hope that you have an amazing week, and I will see you next week. Bye.